Good.
I have white. Really white.
And welcome to Mirror Darkly. This is our fourth webcast, and as usual, we are starting late. Today's episode will be on philosophy in the church. And eventually we will become more sophisticated in how we operate this. I was up way too late last night trying to figure out how to do 2 or 3 camera broadcasts and how to bring in people from Skype. So at least I have a sense of how to do it. Now it's just a matter of affording to do it.
Yes. And we're down a camera person. So
Yeah.
I'm just inviting people from my friends list to join us. I started a watch party, so I'm going to just invite everybody I know.
That's the plan. Okay. Well, philosophy is mentioned only one time in the Bible. And it's not in a
Oh, we should introduce ourselves, and we should introduce our guest.
I
co-host
suppose we
too.
should.
Okay.
Okay. I'm Robin Nettlehurst, and
I'm Ruth Nettlehurst, and this is
I'm Mary Mays.
Mary Mays, our good
Yes.
friend. And she's joining us this week because JP and Lori are out of town, so
yes,
they're actually moving.
yes, they are.
So
Which is why we need to figure out how to get Skype to work,
yes.
among other things. So it's not that difficult, and actually it's not horribly expensive. So
We'll get
there
there
are different
eventually.
options. We'll get there eventually.
You can send us money and then we could afford to
Yes,
do
now
it.
we have better cameras, better sound. Yes, all those things would be
Bigger
better.
pockets.
Yeah.
So the only place in the Bible that mentions philosophy is Colossians chapter 2, verse 8. And the way it reads in the NIV is, "See to it that no one takes you captive through hollow and deceptive philosophy, which depends on human tradition and the elementary spiritual forces other than on Christ." And then, and that's in 1 Timothy chapter 6, verses 20 and 21. And Paul writes, "Timothy, guard what has been entrusted to your care. Turn away from godless chatter and the opposing ideas of what is falsely called knowledge, which some have professed and in so doing have departed from the faith." And those two verses combine some people to want to reject philosophy and even education in relationship to the church. And of course, to no one's surprise probably, I would tend to disagree with both characterizations of these two passages. I recall being at a certain institution some years ago, and 3 times a week they would have a chapel service. And I remember one chapel service, we had a person speaking who actually worked at the college, whose IQ level is probably the size of my shoe. But in any case, he's standing up there and he goes,
Oopsie.
"What's that?"
Sorry, I started a watch party on your phone, but now we're hearing you.
Yeah, we
So I
don't
gotta
wanna do
mute
that.
you. I'm figuring out
Turn
how to
down
mute.
the,
Oh,
turn
just
down
the
the
mute.
volume.
Okay.
you know, like a normal phone,
What did I do? I think I just shut your phone off.
probably.
No, I got Bixby going. Sorry. Rookie. Well, your buttons are different than mine.
Yes, I'm sure they are. Okay.
So the guy with his green is
Sorry.
Yeah,
Sure.
anyway, he's standing up there and he says to everybody, going like this, trying to act all holy, "Everybody turn off your minds." And I think to myself, oh, that's not a good idea. Although it does explain a lot of problems at that institution. And at the moment, the person that said that, he went on for a while. It wasn't just a misstatement on his part. He really meant it. And his idea was that, we need to worship God and therefore shut off our minds. And I thought, this is ludicrous. And it also contradicts things that we see biblically. For instance, Paul, in talking to the church in Corinth, and their fixation on speaking in tongues. Not a problem with speaking in tongues, but he says that for this reason, the one who speaks in the tongue should pray that they may interpret what they say. For if I pray in a tongue, my spirit prays, but my mind is unfruitful. So what shall I do? I will pray with my spirit, but I will also pray with my understanding. I will sing with my spirit, but I also will sing with my understanding. And so singing, praising God, worshiping God, there needs to be your mind engaged in doing that. And of course, the importance of wisdom and knowledge biblically is something that we see repeatedly stressed. Jesus himself made the comment in John chapter 8, verse 32, the truth will set you free. Now, of course, Rousseau made the withering comment, humanity is born free and everywhere it's in chains. It's from the opening lines of the Social Contract by Rousseau. Anyway, our aim should always be to want to discover what the truth is. Our focus should be on arriving at the truth, however we may need to do to get there. Paul was not afraid to let the facts take him wherever they might go. And in fact, he argued strongly for the importance of discovering the truth and finding the truth, not being afraid of the truth. Theology, after all, in general, is a melding of Greek philosophy with Jewish thinking about the Bible and God. And philosophy and all that comes from it are derived from the Bible itself. There's a whole class of literature in the Bible, in fact, called wisdom literature. The books of Job, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Songs, or sometimes called Song of Solomon, are all classified as wisdom literature. Some of the Psalms also fall into the category of wisdom literature. There's a genre of literature that was common throughout the ancient Near East, the Bible not excluding that. In the New Testament, the book of James can be classified as wisdom literature, and for that matter, the Joseph narrative in Genesis also is usually classified as wisdom literature. And wisdom and knowledge are worth pretty much everything. Proverbs chapter 4, verses 5 through 13, Solomon writes, "Get wisdom, get understanding. Do not forget my words or turn away from them. Do not forsake wisdom, and she will protect you. Love her, and she will watch over you. The beginning of wisdom is this: get wisdom. Cherish her, and she will exalt you. Embrace her, and she will honor you. She will give you a garland of grace to grace your head and present you with a glorious crown. Listen, my son, accept what I say, and the years of your life will be many. I instruct you in the way of wisdom and lead you along straight paths. When you walk, your steps will not be hampered. When you run, you will not stumble. Hold on to instruction, do not let it go. Guard it well, for it is your life." So the word philosophy comes from two Greek words, phileo, to love, and sophia, wisdom.
You didn't
And
like
both-
my definition.
Well, your
I
definition
said
is
philo
funny.
like philo dough and soft like in soft dough. So there you go.
Yeah,
It's because I didn't take any Greek.
yeah. Well, interestingly, both in Greek and in Hebrew, the word for wisdom is feminine. And so this is why the author of Proverbs refers to wisdom as she.
Go girls.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, the word folly also is feminine.
Yeah. Oops.
It's
Okay,
just an accident.
Not good news for us.
It's just accident of grammar. That is, most
Okay.
languages, unlike English, all the nouns have gender. In Hebrew, the nouns are either masculine or feminine. There's no neuter. In Greek, you have three possible genders: masculine, feminine, and neuter.
Okay, so I have a question then.
Yes.
Why are people so afraid, especially, well, I'm not gonna say especially Christians, but
Well-
why are people afraid to learn new things? It's
Because they're afraid of being wrong.
Or
That is-
failure.
Yeah, no, generally speaking, people, their ego gets wrapped up in what they know and what they think they know, what they think they understand. And to have what they think they know or understand challenged or questioned or blown to smithereens, it blows up their ego too. And what you have to do is to separate your ego from what it is you know. That is, as a human being, as a Christian particularly, truth should be what we want above all else. Wherever, and we should be willing to go wherever the facts take us, not be afraid of that. But yeah, people are afraid of information, they're afraid of knowledge.
New things.
In the church, you have people afraid that if you become educated, if you study the Bible thoroughly, if you learn all the languages, study theology, that you will drift far away from God and reject God and become an atheist and start humping dogs. I don't know.
By the way, Steve Hudson asked, is Robin a philosopher? So he put a hyphen in there, so he doesn't eat much philo dough. So.
No.
But well, it's interesting because this is Black History Month, and so I do a lot with the civil rights movement and teaching kids about, like we watched a video about. I have a cold, so words are coming to me much more difficultly than normal.
Yes, you should be
that's not
thankful
even
that
a word.
she's actually managed.
I haven't been
here.
upright most of the day,
No,
so
she's not been feeling well.
Frederick Douglass, and we also watched a video about Harriet Tubman, and we read some books about Harriet Tubman, and they've done some reading comprehension and stuff about her. And what I pointed out to the children was that Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman and other people like them that had been slaves that worked towards freeing slaves and things like that all learned how to read and write, and that the plantation owners didn't want their slaves to learn to read and write, because if you learn to read and write, then you can be free. You can have power if you can read and write. And so I really push that with kids, that it's really important to learn how to read and to write and to do it well. And I think that as Christians, we should be taking the lead in education, and I don't mean by like homeschooling and private schools. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about education as an institution. I'm talking about educating ourselves, educating our children, and being educated, right?
Encouraging it.
Reading lots of books and watching movies. Like right now I'm watching a series on Netflix called The 9 Months That Made You. And it's quite interesting how soon after conception that things start happening that we didn't know before, because now we can see things on a more like microscopic level. And our technology is better, so we know more about what happens in utero. And it's interesting because there are little, like these little cilia that twirl left, I think it is, that direct the organs where to go. And there's this basketball player who he was drafted into the NBA. And he was like, I don't know, 6th place draft. I don't know anything about drafting, but I guess that's a good thing. But he didn't want them to know that he was a mirror image person, because his cilia didn't start twirling. And so his heart is actually on the wrong side. And his teammate, they know now, but he was afraid it would knock him farther down in the draft, like his stock would go down, whatever that means. And so he would put him farther down in the draft and he wouldn't get on as good of a team. He plays now for the Denver Nuggets. But anyway, when he puts his hand over his heart for the
Pledge of Allegiance.
for the national anthem, his teammates would tease him like, shouldn't you do it this way? So, but anyway, but just, learning about little things like that, constantly educating yourself about the world and about history and things like that is so important. And there are a lot of Christians, they won't take additional classes. They don't educate themselves.
Although it's
in
not
things.
unique to Christianity. I mean, you
Right.
told me before that you've got people that you work with that it's like they don't open a book since they finished college.
Right.
Which
That
is very bizarre.
Not necessarily all the people I work with.
No, I
anybody
said
I'm working
some
with.
people
Yes.
we've worked with.
Yeah,
They,
that
they
they
feel
just
like
don't.
they've gone to college, they learned everything they need to know, and so they're done.
Yeah,
They don't need to learn anything else ever again.
yeah.
And that just makes no sense to me.
And right now, with the body of knowledge growing exponentially with the advent of Google and things like that, we have the knowledge of the world at our fingertips. Look at it, read it, but be skeptical too. Don't just accept everything that you read. Like I read an article on salt, and Tim Church and I got into this thing about salt because people are like, oh, you have to use Himalayan salt, it's healthier, and you have to use sea salt, it's healthier. And I'm like, salt is salt is salt.
Yeah, it has a chemical.
It has its same chemical compound, but
You can have other impurities mixed in with it, but then that's not salt. That's the impurity.
right. And then in this article, they mentioned that in some of the sea salt that there's bits of plastic in it from the
great.
plastic in the ocean.
Mhm.
And
That's encouraging.
Jolene, another friend of ours, she said, well, I'm going to look into that plastic thing because she's like, I didn't know that. And I said, well, I was kind of skeptical about that. But the source for this was NBC News, which is a semi-credible source now. I would be careful what I read from them, but I think on salt, they might be okay to read.
There's the Gellerman theory of news reading.
The what?
Gellerman.
What's that?
Gellerman is a physicist. And he noticed when he would read articles in his newspaper and they were talking about physics that they were always wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And they'd turn the page and read an article on something else. And eventually it came to him, if they're always wrong on the subject that I know about,
Mm-hmm.
then why do I assume they're going to be right on anything else for that
Mhm.
matter?
Yeah, you go.
And so and people have pointed out that you talk to anybody that has been in the news, that has been the subject of a news report,
Mm-hmm.
they'll always tell you that they
That's
have
not what
messed
they
it
said.
up.
Mm-hmm.
It's not what I said. That's not
So
that what happened.
yeah, news is sloppy. Let's put it that way.
Sensational.
Well, there's
Yeah,
the
the-
sensationalism in it. There's the desire to be first.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're afraid that if you don't report this right away, that somebody else is going to scoop you. And
Then you might get it wrong. Who gives
But-
but then if you go too fast, you're likely going to get. Generally speaking, whatever you hear in the news in the first 24 hours of something,
Yeah.
discount most
disregard
of
it. Well, and I heard someone say, and I don't remember the source, but it's better to be right than be first.
Mm-hmm.
But now it's like we've got to get in there. Like news happens so fast,
Right.
but you
And they've
also
got 24 hours to fill up too.
well you
Exactly.
have to distinguish though
And we're more in
between the
communication
cable
about their
news,
parts
which is
of the
really
world and-
cable opinion,
Mhm.
versus
Well,
like
the online sites are not much better.
yeah.
Is if you look at them, it's mostly opinion.
But well, what I'm saying is like when you watch like the nightly news, let's say, for example, okay, this happened and this happened. They're just telling you what happened. They're not
Yes.
telling you what to think about it. But when you get on like MSNBC, CNN, Fox, it's 24 hours of opinions. There's very little actual news in there.
Fact. Fact.
Yeah,
and
and-
even with the facts, they don't always get them right. I've
Right.
noticed that.
right.
I noticed this myself whenever I read an article, say in the LA Times, on Tesla or SpaceX.
Mhm.
They're constantly getting things wrong. They're
Mhm.
mixing an awful lot of odd opinions in with whatever it is they're saying. They often don't report on anything associated with the space program or astronomy. So yeah, Gellerman is right.
Yeah, but it's always good to
And
be
biblical
skeptical of
stuff,
anything.
forget it.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's good to be skeptical of everything you hear, read, all that kind of stuff, and
Yes.
look at it from different
And be as
perspectives.
skeptical about the things that you think you agree with as you would be
Uh-huh.
about those things that confirm that are against what you believe. That is, if somebody told you something opposed to your beliefs, you're going to automatically be skeptical and question it. But if they say something that supports what you believe, the natural reaction is, well, yeah, of course.
Rush
Mhm.
right for it, right?
Yeah. They say bad things against lawyers and you don't like lawyers, you'll assume, well, of course, that's the way lawyers are. Yeah,
I
you
know that
need
one
to,
for
you
a
need
fact.
to, you need
Worked
to
for him
be,
27 years.
it is counter to human nature to be skeptical.
Mhm.
And so it takes a lot of work. Thinking about philosophy, we move into that. Roger Williams, or not Roger Williams, Roger Bacon.
Was he a singer?
Yeah.
No.
That was Roy Rogers.
Or my
And
notes
then-
on this.
Roger something.
Oh, Roger Miller.
Miller.
Yeah.
He was great.
Yeah, he was.
Where'd it go?
Gosh, now all the songs just went out of my head.
Uh-oh.
I really am sick.
Yes, you are.
I'm lucky I'm holding up my own head at this point.
Yeah,
Actually, I'm feeling a little bit better tonight than I was this morning.
that's good.
So I was a rag doll on the couch.
At
So
least you got out of bed.
yeah, I did. And then I had to help him dismantle our bed because we got a new bed,
So
sort of.
somebody gave it
New
to
to
us.
us. Yeah,
Where'd it go?
I know.
Yeah, it's in here.
Well,
That's
while
right.
you look, I can do our little
Yeah,
commercial.
go ahead and do the
Okay,
commercial.
because the top of your head isn't that interesting.
No, it's not.
At least it's got hair on it though.
This is true. I'm thankful for that.
A Mirror Darkly, Unbridled Inquiry is brought to you by Quartz Hill School of Theology. You can find us online at www.theology.edu. Classes are offered online as well as in person. You can take philosophy classes or Greek or Hebrew. And educate yourself and be skeptical about things. Okay, so Quartz Hill Community Church is a local body of believers who believe in loving God and loving people. We're located at 51st Street West and Avenue K in Quartz Hill, California. We have morning worship every Sunday morning beginning at 11 a.m. Our services combine traditional as well as contemporary worship with Bible-centered teaching. We offer Sunday school for all ages. Sunday school begins at 10 a.m. On Wednesdays, we have dinner and prayer meeting beginning at 5:30 p.m. If you're in the area, join us. You can also follow our Facebook page and check out our website at www.littlebluechurch.org. We actually have a few domains, but that one's my personal favorite. And this is being broadcast from our church. This is actually the library in our church. It's only a small portion of it that you see behind us.
Yes.
Anyway, did you find it?
No, I did
Oh.
not. That's okay.
Okay. Well, why don't we talk about Occam's razor? I want
Okay.
to talk about that.
Okay. Well, Occam's
Yeah.
razor is.
It's not what you shave with.
No, it's not. Occam's razor is to keep it simple, stupid.
Yeah, No, I was saying
Philosophy.
that before, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Right.
Keep it
And
simple,
the
stupid.
concept is that when you are confronted by competing theories, the simplest theory that explains everything is more likely to be correct than a complicated theory. And so as your theory becomes increasingly complex, that starts raising red flags for you, and you start thinking, well, maybe we've got something wrong here. One of the crises in particle physics is the fact that there are so many different particles, and it seems more complicated than it should be. And so there's a desperate search to try to find a way of simplifying it. Nothing has come out yet, and what we have works,
Just hearing
but
the
it's
words
just complicated.
particle physics scares me.
I know. My brain goes.
What?
"Nope."
What?
Well, we watch Big Bang Theory, and they'll like have this whole string of stuff. Well, stuff that they talk about, and I look at him. Yeah, I look at him. I go, "Is that like a thing?" He goes, "Yeah, that's a thing." I'm like, "Okay," and we keep moving. By the way, if any of you has questions or you want to participate in the conversation, just write a comment. I've got our social media up here. I can't control YouTube Live from here. It's on my phone, which is way over there. But
We're
Facebook.
streaming at the same time as Facebook.
Yes. So anyway, so feel free to jump into the conversation and ask a question or add a comment, because I will interrupt and read the comment on the air, and we'll talk about it.
But anyway, William of Ockham is one of the important philosophers in the development of what has come to be known as scientific method. Bacon being another individual that was involved in that and gets credited with
We
it.
know everything's better with bacon,
That's right.
even Philo.
Yes.
You're never gonna stop at that, right?
Yeah, well, the way to think about philosophy is think of it as a tool. As it's it's methodologies that help us learn how to think more clearly. And some are more theoretical than others. They will also sometimes contradict each other. But things that come out of philosophy, for instance, would be logic and the rules of logic. Those are things that will help you learn how to think more clearly.
I don't know, I didn't do well in calculus.
Calculus is math, although math does play a role in logic, and logic
Yeah.
is important.
No,
in
it's
understanding
statistical
Well,
analysis,
I,
I think they
I
changed,
stuck.
it to statistical analysis, cause nobody could pass calculus. When I was going to college in the 70s, seriously,
Yeah.
I was all geared up to take calculus and it was statistical analysis, and the first thing he did the first day of class was give us a green die and a red die so we could do the odds on it, and I'm going, oh boy, this is gonna be great.
So calculus is relatively recent in the development of science. Leibniz and Newton came up with
I like
that.
math. I love
See,
math.
I stunk
I
at
love
math, but I was good at logic. And which I didn't think, because I didn't think it wasn't logical to me that I'd be good at logic, because I didn't think I was a logical person.
There's a
But
lot
I
of
found
logicals in
out
there.
I was more logical than I realized, and that helped me discover that.
And being
So-
human beings, Leibniz and Newton argued their entire lives over who came up with the ideas of calculus first. Generally, it is thought that Newton was first. However, Leibniz gets the last laugh because the symbols that you use in doing calculus come from Leibniz.
Oh. Okay.
So, Leibniz is also important in theology. He wrote a book called Theodicy, Theodicy, which is the justification of God. And
There's
that's
something new every day.
and that's dealing with questions. See, both Newton and Leibniz are Christians, and Leibniz, although Newton was kind of weird in some of his beliefs, but anyway, Leibniz wrote this whole book on if God is good and all powerful and loves us, then why is there suffering? And so he wrote this book to try to deal with that question. And he argued that this is the best of all possible worlds. That is, if you assume that God is good, then he's going to make the best possible world. And if you assume he's powerful, then you assume he's capable of doing so. And so he argued that given human free will, this is the best possible world there could be. To assume that it could be better than it is, would assume that then God is not powerful, not smart, or that he doesn't actually love us. It doesn't really solve the problem, but it does explain the parameters of the problem.
Makes you feel better.
They make you feel
In your
better
crisis.
in your crises. But this shows the overlap between theology and philosophy. That is, theology is something that came into existence when Judaism came into contact with the Greeks. And theology is something that developed within Christianity. Now, the concept of doing theology has now spread to other religions, but its origins are Christian.
Okay, so what is the definition of theology then?
Theology is simply the study of God.
Okay.
Theos being God, and ology is study
Okay.
of. And so it's study of God, which is the study of anything associated with God.
But you said
And there are various
they
ways
didn't-
of
they
doing
didn't have
theology.
that until
Yeah,
they didn't
we didn't develop the concept of doing
study of God.
a logical, systematic way of thinking about God and humanity's relationship to God.
You'd say,
And the idea of doing things in a logical, systematic, careful way is something that comes out of philosophy.
okay.
As you have
You had said something earlier about people being afraid to learn too much or something to that
Mhm.
effect.
yeah, they're afraid if they learn too much that they
They'll
will
question their beliefs or
they'll
something.
question their fundamental beliefs and reject them.
Oh, I
They'll
noticed-
learn that what they believe isn't so.
I noticed that.
And
I
sometimes
say
that's the
certain
case.
religions-
Oh, sorry.
When I say about certain religions, I was
Mhm.
brought up, born and raised in Catholic Church,
Uh-huh.
and I remember thinking of a few people that they were closed-minded. They didn't want to know anymore. They felt like almost like if they had to believe in this certain set of rules and they couldn't stray this way or that way or question anything, or they were going straight to hell or something to that effect. So I did come across that as I was growing up, and I remember thinking, wow, that's weird, because you want to try and learn as much as you can.
Mhm.
And I really believe, and I think someone even said something to that effect, that, oh, you don't question it. You know, you have to go blind faith, and
Yeah.
you know.
Well, and you get that in Protestantism too, especially like with homeschooling and Christian schools. It's and it's not true of everyone, but a lot of parents who homeschool, they want to protect their children from certain knowledge or protect their children from certain people. And we had our kids in public school. I mean, I'm a public school teacher, and there's no way on my salary I could afford to put them in private school. But it was important to me that my children learn as much as they could about everything, that there's nothing that's bad knowledge to have.
Right.
We have a comment from a watcher listener. I like the point you guys were making earlier about education. I'm reminded of one of my favorite classics, Fahrenheit 451.
Mhm.
This is Jennifer Leroux, I think
Yeah.
you say her name. Also,
She
sometimes,
actually took classes here.
okay, also sometimes American news is filtered. You see more realistic news from other countries. And thank you for linking the Keep It Simple Stupid with Occam's razor. I wasn't aware of the term, so you're welcome.
Yeah,
But-
William of Ockham was a 13th century British philosopher.
My phone is ringing. That's not a good thing. Hopefully it'll go away. Oh no, I'll be right back.
Vanessa or Tony.
Oh, it's my sister.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So,
See, this is why we have to improve our tech.
yes. Can't just work off our
You
phones
think?
forever. Yeah.
I slept way too late looking at things.
Yeah. Let me text her from your phone really fast and tell her.
Okay. So yeah.
You were saying something about what's his name was the razor guy. Who was
Oh,
Oh
yeah.
yeah,
13th
British
century.
philosopher, 13th century philosopher, very important to the history of human thought. And a lot of philosophers have
She never
contributed
comments.
enormously to the way Western civilization functions. Some of these ideas, well, I mean, they have transformed our world. That is, the concepts of logic, that the world functions in a cause and effect relationship, our assumption that the external universe actually exists, that we can perceive the universe accurately with our senses, all things being equal unless we're drunk or sick or
Yeah.
something.
But aren't the
These-
senses heightened then?
Yeah, these are assumptions that underlie Western philosophy, Western civilization, the way we live our lives. These are not things that exist necessarily outside of Western civilization.
I've noticed in the past, I don't know, few years that you know, all that. When I remember in the Catholic Church again, one of the priests telling us that if you know Protestants and Catholics and Jews and Hindus and all, if they stopped trying to figure out how different they were,
Mhm.
they'd realize how very much the same.
Well, obviously, Judaism and Christianity are very similar because Christianity is a sect of Judaism.
But I mean, they all have a
Hinduism, though, is
Well, it
poly-
started that way.
Yeah,
central
It's not
Hinduism.
figure.
considered that anymore.
It's not considered that anymore. Hinduism, though, is a polytheistic,
Excuse me, I'm gonna sneeze.
So maybe you didn't.
and
change
philosophically, the philosophy underlying Hinduism is somewhat radically different. Buddhism then was a reform movement in Hinduism to try to, because Hinduism, they kept multiplying the gods, they became increasingly
Right,
complicated.
That's true, yeah.
And so Buddhism was an attempt to simplify it. So Occam's razor at work.
Oh, here's an interesting discussion.
Oh,
Okay,
sorry.
and this is probably off topic, but it just came up with you mentioning Buddhism. I was in some conversation, it was quite a long time ago, and I mentioned Buddhism as a religion, and somebody said it's not a religion, it's a philosophy. And then I'm like, I think it's what is it? I like to say it's a difference without a
But no, there is a
it's a distinction without a difference.
No, there is a
difference without
distinction, and that's to a large extent accurate, like with Confucianism. Confucianism is actually more a philosophy than it would be a
Right.
religion.
Right.
Buddhism would be the same because Buddhism is atheistic. That is one of the aspects of Buddhism, the reform part of it, was getting rid of all the gods.
Right.
However, on a popular level, Buddhism often behaves as a religion, like Confucianism on a popular level may behave as a religion.
Mhm.
And people may worship Buddha and give offerings, and so it kind of mixes in with.
Well, I think that when
It's
the priest
Hindu,
said that, he
um,
meant more of a believing in one central, so Hinduism is it, but one central, you know, being who set a good example instead of trying to figure out what all our differences are, you know. and
Yeah.
you mainly you're talking about Protestants versus the Catholics, and, you know.
Yeah.
But
Well, the problem is that in anything that we do, we argue over. It's like Picard or Kirk.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Who is the best captain, or we argue. USC versus UCLA. Well, that's an easy one.
The answer to that is UCLA.
Or the Dodgers or anybody else.
Right.
Yes, obviously, some things are very easy to answer. Other things are more complicated. It's obviously the Dodgers. Douglas Adams wrote the book, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Universe. What's the answer?
Galaxy.
Or Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. What is the answer to life, the universe, and everything?
42.
42.
I'm confused.
You have to read the
You
book.
left me behind.
What is the most famous baseball player that wore the number 42?
Favorite thing.
Jackie
No,
Robinson.
Jackie Robinson.
First African-American ball player in the
Right.
major leagues. What team did he play for? The Dodgers.
There you go.
So there
Just
you
proved
go.
your point, right?
Yep,
Right.
on Occam's razor, it's a very easy line to draw.
But
So-
see, argument is part of human nature, and the reality is, and this is again something that we assume in Western civilization, that there are lots of answers that are either wrong or incomplete, and one answer that is correct. So,
Right.
like in physics, try and figure out, how does the universe actually function? And so you've had all sorts of theories over the years, and we have over the years narrowed things down. And so we have now Einstein's theory of general and special relativity, and you have quantum mechanics, both incredibly powerful theories that explain reality very, very well.
And neither of us understand.
No. I
Unfortunately,
remember some of it.
unfortunately, the general theory of relativity works really well for the big stuff, and quantum physics works really well for the
Quantum
little
physics or
stuff.
Quantum mechanics, is it the same
But
thing?
they are not compatible with each other,
Mm.
which lets us know that we still don't really fully understand things. They work very well in their realms.
Is that what the unifying theory is about?
Well, that's what we
Or
want to do,
whatever
is
it's
come up
called.
with a grand unified theory.
There we go. Okay.
Theory of everything is what it's called.
It's a
And
theory.
string theory,
It's
which is
string
what
theory.
Sheldon was working on for a long time, was an idea of how to get those two things to work together to
Oh.
unify everything. Problem with string theory, though, is there is no way of making it actually work. It works very nicely as a mathematical
Paper, yeah.
thing. It's very pretty, but it has no predictive value. And in science, if you can't predict something with it, it's not useful.
Mm.
That is, there's no experiments that we can run, at
Right.
least with anything that we have currently, that would either prove or disprove it. And actually, in science, what you're trying to do is disprove things. You try to break the theories. With Einstein's theory, which was first proposed in 1905, there have been a lot of experiments, and all the experiments confirm, that is, when you run the experiment, it's what Einstein predicted.
Mhm.
And on quantum physics, every time you run the experiment, it's what the theory predicts. And scientists know that these theories are incomplete still. But anyway, the point being that arguing over what is true and what is not true is something that we do in all realms of our lives. Why is this machine not working? Why is my car broken? There's a lot of wrong answers. There's one or two right answers. And so when you think in terms of religion, it's going to be the same way. That is, we shouldn't be shocked and think that, oh, this is weird.
This is written down and it's in stone, and
Well,
so
no,
you
it's,
can't talk differently about it.
yeah, that is, we shouldn't think it's weird that we don't all agree. That is,
Mhm.
there's a difference of opinion between Jewish people and Christians, between Buddhists and Hindus and everybody else. Not everybody is going to be right.
Yeah,
That's
well,
the sad
I think
reality.
that's kind of what he's
That-
trying to get across. to us, is that it wasn't
Assuming, now this is an
that. We aren't so
assumption.
different after
If
all.
we assume that God actually exists, that is, that God is as real as, say, this coffee cup,
Mhm.
there are things that you can say that are true about this coffee cup, and there's a lot of things you can say about it that aren't true. If God is actually real, then there are things we can say and think and relate to that are true, and a lot of things that are not true.
Okay, I want to get back to the truth
Okay.
thing, but I want to catch us up on our comments.
All right.
So Jennifer posted a little while ago, she learned in a psychology class to question everything. Otherwise, ice cream causes death as a headline in news story. Upon further inspection, is more like going swimming within 20 minutes after eating can lead to muscle cramping and sometimes death when you were first led to believe something somewhat different. Then Stephanie Gross joined us, and she, when we were talking about 42 and the Dodgers, she goes,
Yeah.
"Yay!" And the Dodgers won today. Are they playing today?
It's a preseason game. They played.
Oh,
White
geez, do they
Yeah, I was gonna
ever
say
get
it's awfully
time off?
early.
Like they
They
just
played-
played in October.
They played. No, they're in spring training now.
Jeez,
They played the White Sox today. I'm
They have
glad
a
to hear that they
sucking
won.
vacation. is
I
coming.
got the notification on my computer this morning
Oh,
that they
okay.
were playing. I hadn't had time to look at it.
Okay, I
Put your
just
hat,
hope
your
they don't.
shirt on so you can
They,
watch it.
I hope
So
they
I
don't
can
peak
mention-
early.
So I can mention that tomorrow
Okay.
when I do my sermon, I will talk.
Okay, well,
And spring training, the
Stephanie's-
Dodgers beat the White Sox. This is
Stephanie
good.
Stephanie
Thank
stole
you.
your thunder.
Thank you,
Yes.
Stephanie. No, I'm glad to
Yeah,
know.
and then Jennifer said she always thought 42 was the reference of chromosomes, but there's not 42
It's
chromosomes.
30.
No, it's
What is it?
we can have Google. We can look
Yes,
it
well,
up.
you look it up because I got machines going all over the place here. Okay, but you were talking about truth, like the truth of this cup, but right now seems like the overriding philosophy today is
You lost your
the word's not coming to my head. The one where I have my own truth,
Yes.
existentialism.
Well, existentialism.
Oh,
Yeah,
he
the
said 46. Rick looked it up for us. Thank
Oh,
you,
thank
Rick.
you, Rick.
46. Yes.
quicker
So
than me
Jennifer,
doing it.
46.
Yes. No, Douglas Adams just came up with that because he had to do something funny
Right.
for the purposes of
Right.
the novel.
Google DNA is organized into long structures called chromosomes. So while a human cell, diploid or diploid, has 2 copies of 23 chromosomes for a total of 46,
Mm.
a wheat cell, hexaploid, has 6 copies of the 7 chromosomes, 42 chromosomes total. Corn has 20 chromosomes total and rice has 24. So 42 is wheat chromosomes. So that's meaning to life,
Is
the universe and everything is
Bread.
wheat chromosomes. Bread, yes. Unless you're you have you're gluten sensitive.
Yes.
Anyway, that's a whole other thing. But anyway, so we now have this philosophy. I mean, it's been a philosophy.
Popular.
The popular thing is, well, okay, to me, my interpretation of this is not a cup, it's a bucket because it's so big. So my truth is that this is a bucket and you're drinking coffee out of a bucket. And you can't argue with my truth because that's my perception of
Yes,
it.
I can. Not all opinions are equally valid.
It's not an opinion. This is existential. This is existential. My
Actually,
truth is that this is
That's
a
a
bucket.
very poor reflection of what existentialism
Okay.
actually argues.
But that's what
still,
it. Oh, Jennifer put on a laughing face. That's what it has gotten to. That this
Yeah.
is my truth, and whatever. I mean, there's a certain amount of
Okay.
truth to it in
What-
that.
What they should mean when they say that is that based on my experiences in life, this is how
I believe him.
this is how I feel about this. This is my emotional reaction to it.
Mhm.
Truth is being used in a very fuzzy way
Okay.
there. Is when we say the word truth, what do we mean when we say it?
But there are people who tell you there is no truth. It's all just your perception.
Yeah, and yet if there's a problem on
And
their
we're not all
banking
here.
statement, they'll be right down there at the bank arguing about it.
We're not
This
all,
is-
and we're not all.
Well,
It's just all in our
It's
mind.
because their perception is that there's a mistake in the right.
It is, people will say things like this, but the way they live, the way we live our daily lives in the world today, whether we are here in the United States, part of the center of Western civilization, or if you're in China, despite the influence of Confucianism and Eastern ways of thinking, they have been heavily infected by Western notions of reality. And the way we live our lives on a day-to-day basis, and even before the influence of Western philosophy, the way people lived on a day-to-day basis, they believe things are actually so. That if a man comes up to you and puts a knife in to your throat and says, "Give me your money," you're not going to argue
No.
Existentialism.
existentialism. You'll hand over your wallet.
You only think you're robbing me. I choose not
Right,
to
right.
believe that this is true. So I'm just going to walk away.
Yes. And if a person who thinks this way, they're in a city, they're going to look both ways before they cross the street. We, at some very basic level, are all Westerners in our ways of thinking. What Western civilization has done is take that basic idea and systematized it. That is, we assume things are real. This is an assumption. This is like doing geometry.
That's what I was saying.
In
You
geometry,
all aren't really here. This is all in my mind. I made
Right.
this.
yeah,
This is my
solipsism,
reality.
which is solipsism. Very few true solipsists in the world.
That's what
Did you
happens when
stutter?
the floor is wet. You slipsisms
Yeah.
on it. Slipisms on it.
When what was I gonna do now?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, me too.
Distracted the old
Western
guy.
civilization is.
Western civilization, we assume things are real. When you do geometry, you have axioms and you have theorems, if you recall from geometry.
Yes, they were the bane of my existence.
Okay,
Mr.
what's the
Whitty's
difference-
class,
what's the
like
I
every
love
high
them.
What's
school.
the difference between an axiom and a theory or a theorem?
I don't know, because I really struggled in geometry.
Okay, well, when you take geometry, you memorize the axioms.
Yes.
That is, what is the definition of a point? What is the definition of a line? You memorize that.
We gotta memorize it.
With a theorem, you have a proof.
Right. It's a theory that you have to. prove.
Axioms, you simply assume these things and you build the rest of geometry on top of that.
Okay.
You can't, there are no proofs.
I wish you had been there to tutor me in geometry because I really struggled. I'm like, I don't care that two opposite angles are equal. They just are. Somebody already proved it. Why do I need to prove this? I don't care.
There are no proofs for an axiom. You just assume them. And if you're going to do geometry, say plain geometry, you have to have these things as your foundations.
Basic rules, yeah.
Basic rules. It's like with a game. As you're playing tennis, you don't suddenly bring a bowling ball into it.
It would wreak
Some people
havoc on
might.
you.
Yeah, it's just not going to work too well in a
Right,
game of
right.
tennis.
I'll ask Eric.
You
about
make an
that.
assumption that, the little fuzzy ball that's
Yeah.
yellow or green or whatever, this is what you're
Not
playing
some big
with.
black thing with
Not a
three
big
holes in it.
black thing, that would be weird. So you have, and so for Western civilization and for most people, you have basic assumptions that you can or cannot prove.
Rick said, I didn't look it up. Everyone knows it except you three. Thanks, Rick. We love you too.
And that's your
Sorry.
opinion.
Yeah, that's your opinion. Can you prove that? It's my belief, existentially, that I do know
So
it.
we assume that we're not living in the universe of the Matrix.
Mhm.
That is, that
Yeah.
we're not just in a vat having everything fed into us. Rene Descartes, early philosopher, he's the first one that came up with the idea of brains in vats. That some evil demon has got your brain in the vat and is feeding in all the electrical impulses that make you imagine what's happening. Because the reality is, everything that we think, everything we feel about the world around us is mediated to us through our senses. Our senses send the stuff to our brain through electrical impulses. And so you could theoretically imagine that
This
all
whole
that is
world.
being simulated.
Right.
And so how do you know that this is actually real? It's a reasonable assumption, but it is an assumption. We assume that.
Mhm.
And we assume that what our senses are telling us are, it's accurate.
Yeah, accurate.
and we assume that what's out here is real. Those are fundamental axioms or presuppositions of Western civilization and Western philosophy.
I take exception to the world, to the word infected. The rest of the world is
Oh.
infected with Western philosophy.
Well, it is.
I know, but infection makes me think of like some kind of a disease. or
Well, it's
something.
not necessarily a bad thing.
Losing pus.
No,
Yeah, it's
no.
not necessarily.
Dr.
It's just a
Pepper.
way of expressing
that's
the
so- that's so
concept
gross.
that
I love her.
the reason that the rest of the world has accepted this way of thinking is because it works. Is
I know,
what
it's just the,
the-
word infected just really
the- there is one philosophy that the United States is responsible for formulating: pragmatism.
Hmm.
As if it works,
keep on
then
doing it.
that's all that matters. Does this work?
Don't,
That's the
don't
question
fix
we,
it if it's not
that's
broken.
the question that we ask about things. Does this work? That's
The
pragmatism at
ends
its
justifies the means.
is base level. And Western civilization works.
Mhm.
And so that's why it has become dominant.
Can
because
you
it
use
works.
a different word? Effective, I don't know what to think
Well,
about
it's
that.
a way of
I know,
expressing the
exactly.
concept that is that these ideas, I mean, you can use the word meme. A meme is an idea that infects the mind. I mean, you have the funny ones that you see on Facebook, but a meme is a concept, an idea that gets into somebody else's head.
Mm.
And you have this thing that is simply there. It's like back in the 80s, you know, the catchphrase, "Where's the beef?"
Where's the
from
beef?
the Wendy's
The little
commercial.
old lady?
Little
Mhm.
lady, for those that
Where's
are
the beef?
Too young
more,
to
more
remember.
comfortable distance from the apocalypse.
Yes.
To quote Emo Phillips. So there are a lot of philosophical concepts that we take for granted, and Christianity, particularly the 20th and 21st century varieties of evangelicalism, despite the tendency for some to try to reject philosophy, modern Christianity is essentially Enlightenment infected. That is, the
Use your
Enlightenment.
word.
Yes. That is, we are children of the Enlightenment,
Okay.
and that's not a bad thing. Although some people think the Enlightenment is not a good thing and will argue against it, the reality is it's part and parcel of the way
Stay
the modern
ignorant as
world
long as
works.
possible and you can't be infected. I think.
But the church, regardless of, you know, even those that want to reject philosophy, thinking, education, I mean, if you live, you have a philosophy of life, a way of looking at the world. And so the question is whether or not you're doing it in a rational, systemized way, or is it just, you know, blundering along.
Mhm.
I grew up in Disneyland, so.
And blundering along is perhaps not the best way of making your way about. As the more you know, the more you understand, the better off you're likely to be. As you understand how the plumbing works, then when you get a puddle on the floor, then you will have an idea of, okay, there's a plumbing issue here, and then you have to start figuring out what's gone wrong.
Two of your favorite subjects, plumbing and Dodgers. Well, one of them's not your favorite.
No, I
Yeah.
don't like plumbing. It's just I talk about it a lot because I just like it
Because you hate
that
it so
much.
much.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's kind of
And our
like
house is old, so.
yeah. If I talk about USC, it'd be similar to the way I talk about plumbing.
Okay.
See, or if I
Our
talk
house
about-
is almost
Right.
40 years old,
Yeah.
so we're gonna have plumbing
Say
issues.
plumbing, Yankees,
Yeah.
Giants,
Right.
USC. They're all in the same category.
That's your perception and your opinion, right?
Yes, that's
Yeah.
my opinion. But that's what we do in philosophy is you categorize things, or what you do in science. The beginning of things is to try to categorize things in some way.
Otherwise, it'd be chaos. I mean,
Yeah, it is. It's hard to make sense of the world if you can't categorize it in some way. I mean, in the story of Genesis, one of the first things that Adam is tasked with doing is organizing his world. That is, name the animals. So that's something that we as human beings like to do, is categorize. And there are different ways of categorizing. The way we categorize animals now is according to what we understand about how biology works. And so, for instance, we categorize bats as mammals, and that's the way we primarily think of them. In the Bible, bats are listed with the unclean birds.
Yeah.
And that's because for the ancient Jewish people, when they looked at a bat, they focused on the fact that it had wings and flew. And so that's what mattered most to them. Just like when they looked at a dolphin or a whale, it's
a
something that
fish.
lives in the water that has fins.
So it's
So
gotta
it's
be a fish.
categorized along with the,
Would they have seen
Fish.
dolphins and whales?
yeah,
Because they're not close to an ocean.
yes they are. Israel's right on the coast,
Oh, Mediterranean.
on the Mediterranean.
Yeah, okay. Never mind.
And then you've got the
It's not
Red
all
Sea.
desert.
So there's dolphins and whales in the Mediterranean?
Smaller ones, but yes.
Oh.
I mean, what
Interesting.
did Jonah get swallowed by?
Oh, yeah. Oh, if you ask my dad, it was a fish.
Well,
What?
well, that
fish.
illustrates
Oh, yeah.
the categorization issue. because in Hebrew you have one word,
Mhm.
dog, which makes for funny jokes, but it's used for anything that's like a fish that's in the water. And so they use dog for both whales as well as for fish or for dolphins or
Okay.
anything that's swimming.
Well, if you
Like
ask,
that.
ask the TV shows I've been listening to and watching it, the whale was a spaceship.
But anyway, the point
he's
being,
gonna move right past
Yeah,
that.
I
right
know.
past that.
I know.
The point
But
being
that's what they were
that
saying.
there's
That's funny,
development,
yeah.
philosophy,
Ridiculous.
science, theology, these things develop over time. That is how we decide we're going to categorize things. What makes the most sense? It makes more sense to categorize dolphins and whales as mammals for our modern way of thinking and for scientific purposes than to categorize them as fish, because there are some very fundamental differences
Mhm.
between a dolphin and a fish.
Mhm. I mean, really, the only thing they have in common is that they swim and they have fins,
Yeah.
but they have so much more in common with
Us.
mammals. Yeah. And it's interesting because I always wondered how they got past the hair issue, but baby dolphins are born with a small amount of hair.
Really?
And if you ever have hair, that's a characteristic of a mammal. You don't have to have hair your whole life,
Yeah.
which is good for some of our friends who don't have as much hair as some of us.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And categorizing can sometimes be difficult. I mean, platypus is a weird
Yes, very
Uh,
strange
thing
creature.
because, I mean,
What is it?
well, it suckles its young.
Mhm.
It has
got a bill
hair.
like
It's
a duck.
warm-blooded, but it lays eggs.
Mhm.
Weird
But for the most part, it fits into the category of
mammal.
mammal, and it bears some resemblance then to like the marsupials because the way they handle their young is weird compared to the way every other mammal handles it.
Mm.
As their young are not fully developed, that's why they have a pouch.
Right.
So the younger born, then they stay in the pouch for
But
a
a
long time.
platypus
before
is a what? Is it a mammal or a
Mammal.
marsupial?
Mammal, isn't it?
it's a mammal. Well,
Okay.
marsupials are mammals too. They're just a
Right.
weird mammal.
Okay, a weird mammal.
Yeah.
So are platypuses marsupials though?
I don't know that they're I'm not sure what they're classified as. You'd have to look that up. I can't remember.
Rick, do you happen to know that, or can I look it up on Google? How do you turn this thing on?
There's a button on the back here,
Oh, it's on the back.
and then otherwise it acts like an Android device.
Okay.
So
But
for-
then you look, it comes down to even, what is life?
Right.
And that becomes difficult when you start looking at viruses, for instance.
they're
Are
alive.
our
Bacterial
virus
infection.
or viruses
Yeah.
alive or not? And you have a lot of discussion over that question.
Depends on your definition
plant
of alive,
versus-
though, doesn't
Yeah.
it?
Well, that's the question. What what does it mean to be alive?
like being
Plants,
redundant.
plants versus animals.
Mhm.
You have what are they called? Euglena. They're microscopic. Generally, I think they're classified as animals,
Thank you,
but
Jennifer.
they have chlorophyll in
Oh.
them,
Okay,
and so they're a weird animal
I
because
guess.
they have chlorophyll, but they move and wiggle and they eat. Besides the chlorophyll helping them.
Ooh. Okay, so Google. The platypus is classed as a mammal because it has fur and feeds its young with milk. It flaps a beaver-like tail, but it also has bird and reptile features, a duck-like bill and webbed feet, and lives mostly underwater. Males have venom-filled spurs on their heels. Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't know
That's
that.
scary. So Jennifer, are they also marsupials though? Do they have a
Or
pouch?
are they in their own separate category?
Yeah, or do they have a different
And so
category?
that's the other thing too, is we categorize
Because mammal is a
animals.
king. No, animal is kingdom. What's mammal? It's
Mammal
that-
kingdom.
and how everything relates to each other.
right.
Sometimes we undergo some shifts, like the realization that dinosaurs are apparently related to birds. A lot of them
All
had
of them?
feathers. They had feathers. a lot of
Oh,
them.
okay.
And there's, if you think in terms of, what would a dinosaur have tasted like? It would have tasted like a chicken, because chickens are actually,
Birds.
they're descended from dinosaurs.
They are?
Uh-huh.
I didn't know that. Wow.
That's the current thinking.
That's the current thinking.
Hmm.
But yeah, they've discovered a lot of dinosaurs had
A
feathers.
platypus is not a marsupial. Marsupials
Okay.
give live birth after a few weeks of pregnancy, whereas a platypus does not. Platypus is actually Oh, come on. An egg-laying mammal, not a egg-laying mammal. Who wrote that?
Well, it's Wikipedia,
Jeez.
so it's whoever.
It's Quora.com.
Oh,
Get some grammar.
Quora's different.
She's not, I was gonna say she's not the grammar Nazi.
Yeah. Generally speaking,
Here,
Wikipedia,
Wikipedia.
they wouldn't have the grammar and spelling mistakes.
Yeah.
They're pretty good. Wikipedia, they're
Oh.
pretty good about catching those sorts
Just
of
to let
things.
you all know that when you have a vowel sound at the beginning of a word, you have to use an in front of it.
the.
Right. Well, thou goes with
The,
anything,
yeah,
but
right.
an is before a vowel sound. Like it is an honor to meet you, not a honor. Some people change it to a. It's a honor to meet you. Changing it to a does not fix the problem. It's an. So that would
That's
be
our
my
grammar
other
lesson for
webcast.
today.
My other webcast will be Moments with the Grammar Nazi.
Of course, then you'd be competing with Hot for Grammar or whatever her name
Oh
was.
yeah, is she still around?
I don't know.
Hot for words.
Hot for Words. That's
Yeah.
what yeah, that was
It was interesting.
yeah Russian.
Well, I was called the grammar of something or other, but I don't think I'll say that word.
Okay, all right. Together with the 4 species of echidna, it is one of the 5 extant species of monotremes, the only
That's right,
mammals that lay
monotremes.
eggs instead of giving birth to live young.
That's right. They're called monotremes. I forgot.
It's the sole living representative of its family, which is a
Yeah,
really
so
long
it's all
word I
by
can't
itself.
say. Ornithorhynchus.
and
And genus
Supercalifragilistic.
the expialidocious. Yeah, though a number of related species appear in the fossil record. The first scientist to examine a preserved platypus body in 1799 judged it a fake made of several animals sewn
Yeah,
together.
Yeah.
Somebody had
Yeah.
time for that.
Right.
It was some
people did do
Yeah,
hoaxes.
It was
just like
it
the,
was
just
some-
like the Loch Ness monster.
Yeah.
it was some caveman's son science fair project. It's like, Dad, need science fair project. Ooh, son, let's sew these animal parts together, make a fossil. Okay.
Oh dear. I think we're
Paul
close.
doesn't think-
Also an expert on cavemen.
Yes, I
Yeah.
think we're close to the end of our time.
Yeah, I think
5:20.
we're pretty much done
We're
anyway.
pretty much
and,
done.
yeah.
We're
Stick a
talking
fo-
about
stick a fork
platypus.
in us.
Platypus.
Do we have any other questions?
Nope, that was it. We had a lot of
That's it?
people join us today, so
Okay,
that was good.
That's great.
And so what's our episode for next week?
Next week, I was wanting to do an episode. This was suggested by Dandy on emergence Christianity.
Okay.
So I thought that might be interesting to
Alright.
talk about.
So now the following weekend, not next weekend, but the following weekend, we're going to be at the Almond Blossom Festival in Quartz Hill. But I thought we could broadcast from there.
Yeah, that would
Perhaps
be
we
fun.
could.
Yeah, we have unlimited data on our phone service, Robin and I. So yeah, we can do that. So maybe oh, and now Vanessa's calling you. Hold on, babe. We'll be there in a second. I'll call you back. But anyway, so we will, maybe we'll broadcast live from,
That's like, then you have
Almond
other
Blossom
people might be
Festival.
coming up during the middle of the podcast that might have comments too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah,
That
we'll
would
get
be
people to
interesting,
watch.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So,
Okay.
anyway, so this was Amira Darkly, Unbridled Inquiry, brought to you by Quartz Hill School of Theology. You can find us online at www.theology.edu. Classes are offered online as well as in person. Quartz Hill School of Theology is housed at Quartz Hill Community Church, which is a local body of believers who believe in loving God and loving people. We now webcast. We do Facebook Live for our services, and we also record the sermons and put them on YouTube. But we are located at 51st Street West and Avenue K in Quartz Hill, California. We have morning worship every Sunday morning beginning at 11 a.m. And our services combine traditional as well as contemporary worship with Bible-centered teaching. We offer Sunday school for all ages. Sunday school begins at 10 a.m. On Wednesdays, we have dinner and prayer meeting beginning at 5:30. If you're in the area, join us. You can also follow our Facebook page and check out our website at www.littlebluechurch.org. So hopefully we'll see you next week. We air at about 4:00.
Eventually, we'll actually get to where we're doing it on time.
No, we won't.
You don't think so?
No, I do not believe that to be true. That's my existential belief.
Oh.
So you'll just have to accept it as my truth.
Oh my
Okay.
gosh.
Well, I mean, we don't start church on time either. So why
Yeah,
don't we do this
about
on time?
11:07 usually, 11:06. So, but about 11. Like this is
It's
about
a little more
4.
relaxed. That's all. It's
Yeah,
Yes.
just cash.
better that way.
Yeah.
Totally cash. Oh, Jennifer said, so to be clear, today's episode was on questioning things. It was actually on philosophy, but yeah, the whole thing is about questioning.
Yeah, that's
and
what all
that.
of this is about, is
Yeah.
the importance of questioning things.
So, and it'll be posted on YouTube later. So.
Yeah, and there's the past episodes we've done are on YouTube.
The channel is a Mirror Darkly Unbridled Inquiry, and you can subscribe to it. So anytime something is posted,
Mhm.
then you will get an update that something
And
was posted.
there's also a Facebook group, A Mirror Darkly.
Yes, and you can request to join that. It's a public group. So
Yes, and you can suggest things that we might do. Also, you'll
Yep.
find on the Facebook group page a list of what we will probably be talking about at least through March.
okay. So anyway, so guys have a good one and join us again next week about 4:00.
Yes, more or less.
Yeah, thereabouts.
Close enough.
Thereabouts, close.
So,
Yep, it's over.
Except
Although
for this
the
one.
YouTube one's still going.
Yeah. And I don't know how to stop it.
I'm glad
Shut
that
off
there's
the
someone who talks to themselves because I do it all.